Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. We're excited to have you for the second installment of our webinar series. This session is maximizing the value of your walkthrough inspections, and it's part 2 of our series, leveraging technology to improve maintenance efficiency, which we've crafted exclusively for Titan Cloud customers. So I am pleased to introduce today's speakers. I'm joined by Jeff Sexten, Titan's VP of Solution Consulting, and Brent Puzak, also Titan's VP of Solutions Consulting. Both bring a wealth of knowledge and expertise on today's subject. With over 20 years of inspection experience, Jeff and Brent have been performing, auditing, and optimizing millions of inspections throughout their careers in a variety of ways. And today they'll share some insights into how you'll be able to maximize the value of your inspection program. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to the speakers to get started. Jeff and Brent, over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. As Connor kind of mentioned, we're going to start off the presentation with just another brief poll where we're looking at how are you completing your monthly visual inspections? You're doing it via paper, electronic systems, third-party paper, or in electronic systems. So if you guys could actually work through filling that out as we go through the first part of this, it would be greatly appreciated. And we'll go through the results in the end here. Now, we've talked about kind of efficiency in the previous presentations about reducing the noise with alarm data. And here we want to talk about the monthly visual inspections, right? A lot of the states over the last number of years have been really pushing and requiring monthly visual inspections across your sites. And we'll talk a lot about the regulatory requirements on the underground and above ground storage tanks, but then we're going to broaden this out a little bit and talk about all kinds of different inspections that are being performed. But really, Florida, California, they've been doing inspections for a number of years. And what we've seen is that, just within the recent years, is there's been still really a lag on companies getting compliant. So EPA is around 78.4% in their most recent survey. I think that was the end of the year, mid-year results. But they really kind of rushed into generating the inspection process, right? So we actually did an analysis as we prepared for this webinar where we analyzed over 6 months of inspection data with about a little over 22,000 sites, about 67,000 tank systems, which was about 141,000 inspections. And the daunting side was it's about a little over 7 million questions that are being asked across these inspections that are being done. And I guess, most of you guys, you might expand out over multiple states, or you might be doing multiple types of inspections at your sites. But within our platform and the analysis we did, there was over 373 different types of inspections that were being done that were kind of capturing those data points. So it's a tremendous amount of data. And you guys might be feeling that as you're trying to analyze these data, the data kind of cross states, cross inspection types. So we're going to talk a little bit about as we work through this webinar about the different types of inspections, the challenges on pulling data together, and how to kind of move from kind of the status quo of inspections that you might be doing today into more automation, more optimization of those inspections as you move forward. And then we'll give you some options on how we might be able to support you in that as you move forward in your journey with kind of optimizing your inspections. Let's jump forward here and let's go ahead, Jeff.
So Brent, I wanted to summarize the poll results. So good news is 90% of the respondents are doing inspections electronically, whether it's internal or through a third party. So it sounds like a lot of customers on the call actually have migrated into that digital electronic inspection process.
Perfect. Yeah, that's kind of what we're going to talk about, is optimizing that as we move forward. Perfect. So let's talk a little bit about the types of inspections and the frequencies of inspections. Like a lot of companies might be doing inspections with in-house technicians. They could be doing inspections with outsourced third-party inspectors, or it might be a mixture of both of those factors. And then looking at kind of the frequency of when you do those inspections, they range anywhere from quarterly all the way to yearly, monthly, daily. So it's really in any format that's required either by regulatory requirement or by requirements that you might have from internal processes. And what we're going to really focus on, as we move through this, is really helping you kind of reduce the steps within your inspection process, minimize the touch points. And Jeff's going to talk a little bit about what that might look like on a fully automated inspection in just a bit. But we want you to leave this with a process of, how do I, make sure that my inspection process is fully streamlined and you have an expedited process to uncover deficiencies, report it within your organization, and ensure that those are corrected so that you're actually able to kind of minimize maintenance impacts, operational costs, maybe even capital costs longer term. But just to give you an idea of some of the inspections that we actually reviewed in this process, and then also maybe kind of open your eyes to maybe different types of inspections that are being performed out there. And this list certainly is not inclusive, but probably the majority of you guys are doing these inspections for meeting the compliance requirements, doing the specific monthly, quarterly, annual inspection process. But you might not have thought about maybe using these for maybe acquisitions or the divestiture process, remodels or closures, where you can capture these data points from the inspectors in the field and actually use those data points to backfill the database or the overall platform, so that it's taking that weight off of your internal teams. We've got companies that are using this for healthcare inspections that are completely outside of the petroleum industry. So you kind of see certainly mystery shops from companies. So when you think about other parts of your organization or even other companies that you guys may interact with, the sharing of data through these inspection apps can be kind of critical to really help you leverage those data points to find cost savings opportunities, time savings opportunities, across your organization. And Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kind of talk about kind of the different phases of the inspection process.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Brent. And we have another poll coming up. The poll is, what type of processes do you guys have for your inspection, whether it's manual, semi-automated, automated, or nothing at all? So take a couple seconds to answer that, and we want to walk through these steps and kind of get a feel where you guys are, but also where we want to go with our platform and our data, and some of the benefits that Brent will talk about once we get into fully automated and pulling out some of the data. So there was somebody who said that they were fully paper, which is fine. A lot of companies are still paper, but one of the issues with the paper inspections is your time for discovery is very slow, and there's a lot of touch points. So you think about an inspector has a paper inspection on site, they're filling it out. Now they have to physically hand that inspection into somebody or mail it into somebody, and then now there's another step that somebody has to review all of those questions. So going back to the slide, Brent talked about 7 million questions. That's about 50 questions per inspection. That's a lot of questions to go through. Understand there's some smaller ones and some larger ones, but on average, you're looking at 50 questions per inspection. So now every month you're looking at those questions 50 times, however many inspections you actually have to do, pulling that information out manually, now creating some type of work order or dispatch to fix any corrective action that you have, and now you have to manually track it. So the next step of the iteration would be getting some type of digital transformation going and making that inspection into some type of digital format, like a fillable PDF. So now you actually can get that inspection same day, within an hours of being completed, emailed to you. However, you're still going to have to go through and manually review every one of those questions and figure out if there is an issue, create a work order, and then track it through your multiple platforms. So now you got still some paper, it's electronic paper, but still a paper process, manually reviewing it, and then tracking it through the platform. So your touch points are still pretty high. Fully automated, you can have our AFI app and be able to have the inspection completed on site and instantaneously be notified that that inspection was completed. If there's any deficiencies noted, you can actually set up an automated workflow that as soon as that inspection is completed, you could get it over to whoever needs to fix that issue same day, real time. So now you are cutting your time to discovery of issues way down, and you don't have any touch points. The only touch point is on the front end with the inspection. Yes, there's a lot of setup, but you do it once and you're done, and you can have a response and a corrective action done same day on some issues depending on what they are. Brent, how do we do on the poll?
Yeah. So Jeff, it looks like the majority of about 88% of the participants are semi-automated from what they're sending in, and we have about 13% that are still on a manual process, right? So,
all right.
And there's really none in automated or nothing yet.
So, hopefully as we're moving through this, next couple of slides, you can see the real benefit from moving from that semi-automated into that automated workflow. And, want to go over a case study real quick. So we had a customer, they were in the fully manual process. So a state came out and did a random inspection, much like what everybody on this call probably has gone through. It's just their annual inspection. Record keeping inspection. So the inspector went through and actually looked at their monthly inspections. 4 months in a row, the inspector actually noted that the UDC sensor was actually raised up and there was free product in the UDC, indicating a leak. So the Vita root was not alarming because the sensor was pulled up. So obviously, there was a reason why the sensor was pulled up to, so the alarm wouldn't go off because there was free product in here. So what was really occurring here is the customer was using a third party for the inspection, perfectly fine. Third party inspectors are great, but that inspection company was only responsible for inspections. They weren't responsible for any corrective action or fixes. So they were leaving that paper inspection on site with the facility, and the facility was putting it in their UST binder. Great. Nobody was looking at the deficiencies. They just, hey, we got our inspection, put it in the UST binder, and we're good for the next month. They never knew they had to actually, respond to any issues. They just thought it was an inspection and we're good to go. So they had no workflow connecting the two, and they had, no record of any fixes, which was obvious with the 4 straight months of the UDC being raised and noted. So, long story short, the result, costly, $150,000 consent order for one location. This customer had multiple locations, but it was only focused on one location. So how did they correct this? They actually went from that manual process all the way to the fully automated process. So they implemented the AFI app and they connected the workflow. So now as soon as this UDC was flagged in the inspection, somebody was getting notified that they had an issue here and they could go out and fix it. So they were able to eliminate those multiple reoccurring months. And yeah, they might still have an issue that month, but now they have the record keeping to track all of the corrective actions. So when the inspector came back the next time, they could show that had an issue, we fixed it, here's the fix, and it wasn't there the next time the inspector came out. So they went from zero visibility to full visibility. But one of the other things they were able to do is they were able to use some of this data to look at a broader, issues that they might have, whether it is they needed to change a process, they needed to invest capital into the facility to fix something. Obviously, in this case, there's a leak. So something's wrong here that there's leaking. So they could look at this now, and it wasn't just for the monthly inspection. It was just a larger data set that they were able to collect and start, using proactively of problem locations, problem processes, and pulling it out more so than just, check the box inspection done. So, Brent's going to talk, more about how do you leverage the insight to these inspections and all the data.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so we talk about the fact that the state's kind of pushed everyone to start the inspections. Most companies, they kind of rush into the process of creating inspections. They have a checklist maybe that they've used for years and years, but they're not really thinking about how they leverage the data that they're capturing. Are they capturing the right type of data from the inspectors in the field? Or are those inspectors properly trained to capture that data and report it appropriately to them? So a lot of people, if you kind of look at the visual up at the top right, we're kind of in the inspect. You're detecting the issues today. You're probably managing the deficiencies that are coming in, whether it's manual or whether it's semi-automated, automated or automated. You're managing those problems in some form or fashion. But the optimized part of it is probably a segment that at least from the data that we reviewed, that people are still struggling with for quite a bit. So we want to really spend some time on this as we kind of move through the rest of the presentation, is talking about how to leverage these data points and what you need to kind of maybe even clean up your existing process, right? If you're using our app or you're using a manual process or a semi-automated process, what are the things that can really help you to bring that up to the ability to really be able to optimize what you're capturing from your sites? And so, like we mentioned, it's really thinking about how you're going to use that data. What do you want to know about your sites? How can you leverage that data to reduce operating costs, to reduce issues that you and your teams are having to follow up on and process? And then, looking at the frequency, how fast do you need to know about these type of issues to kind of reduce that time of discovery, to actually be notified of those deficiencies in a timely manner so that you can stay on top of those and maybe group similar dispatches to handle issues in a geographic area. So there's a number of ways to kind of pull those data points in. It's also really clearly defining what's considered a passing or failing result, right? If you look at a lot of these state forms, if you look at even customer design forms, to really document the things that are considered a failed response, right? Out of the 7 million questions that we reviewed, there was only 3% of those questions that were actually considered failed responses, right? So what we're seeing is that people kind of have designed these forms are not really triggering what is a true failure. So there's an opportunity to go back even within the automated process and continue to clean up the questions that are being asked, to continue to refine those questions in a way that helps you continually improve your processes. And that's what we want to kind of encourage people to do, is not just kind of set it and forget it, but really leverage a platform approach to allow you to enhance your program and find ways to reduce operating costs, reduce the issues that your teams are actually facing kind of on an ongoing basis. And it's also about, when you think about it, Jeff kind of talked about and alluded to kind of reducing the impacts to your internal teams. But I think one of the things that you have to kind of back away from and think about is also, how do you reduce the impacts on your store personnel that might be filling them out, or your inspectors that are actually doing the work? So when you think about the design of an inspection, right, you might still have to meet what's required on a state form, but thinking about a way that can optimize an inspection where when that inspector goes on the site, or the person filling it out, it goes through the process just like they would complete the inspection. So let's say, for instance, the first thing that they do when they visit your location is go inside and notify the store that they're doing the inspection, and maybe do some internal work, maybe check your tank gauge, your permits, different things like that. So having those questions at the very front, and then merging that through out to your dispenser island and out to your tank farm, it builds efficiency in from the inspector's standpoint. So they're not missing questions. They're not having to jump back and forth through the inspection app to make sure that they've answered everything correctly. If you document a failure, they can document that item there. You can force them to kind of take photographs of each issue that they find. You can force them to add comments that gives a little bit more granularity to what they're actually found out at the location, and maybe even what actually needs to be resolved, so that there's clarity when you receive it as a deficiency report. So really thinking about how that flow, not just where it hits the deficiencies from the internal teams, but how it flows from the very start of that inspection, from that inspector out of the site, through the inspection process, into the submittal of the deficiencies, and then out to the dispatching and the corrective action side. So there's ways to kind of automate those different points and to streamline that, so that if you're actually doing an inspection, it takes you 40 minutes today. If you're able to streamline that access, maybe it saves 10 or 15 minutes for technicians out in the field. You could actually add additional questions to them and actually have them do other work for other parts of your organization. So they can maybe do an imaging survey through their inspection. So you're actually optimizing what they're actually doing on the site. You're capturing more data that can actually be leveraged further across your organization. And then certainly what we can do is route that appropriately into those other groups. So it's not all of those data points are actually hitting maybe the environmental team or the fuels teams and the different other teams that might be on your within your organization. So again, it's all about that optimization side, right? Like we mentioned, we've been doing the inspection and the detection and the management part. How do we get you to the optimizing? So really leveraging the inspections to create that flow completely through the inspection process. And then we'll dive over into the next one, Jeff. I think we've got another poll question here, Connor. So if you'll put that up.
Yep. People are starting to answer, but just, how, going back to Brent's, last slide, how confident are you guys with being able to analyze this data? I was going to, add a couple comments that, one of the things that a lot of companies are so siloed, but being able to take this inspection and gathering data and sharing it across multiple, departments, divisions, to your point, maybe it's an imaging, inspection you're doing at the same time you're doing a USC inspection, or maybe it's a HVAC inspection. The ideas are limitless here of what you can do and all the different data you can collect, and it's not pigeonholed to one specific use or one specific division, department. You can share the data, and to your point, Brent, we can actually split it up so the right data goes to the right people on the right forms. Whoever needs it. So it's not a roadblock internally. So, real quick, I'll go over the inspection app, and then Brent can, talk about some of the ways to use the data here. So you can see here, this is our AFI mobile app with the questions in here. To Brent's point, you can have comments, photos, required, not required, behind the scenes. The way you can set this up is, if there's a visually check some for damage, you can take a picture. If yes, there's damage there, that then can be set up to notify somebody instantaneously. And now you have a record that sump 1 in the app can be connected to sump 2, that there's an issue there. Here it is, the picture, what it is, and it actually will go to a maintenance person, facility person to schedule the repair. And going back to what we've talked about is all this data is now inside of the Edge platform, linking it to different pieces of equipment, which then can be used for a variety of different things, whether it's capital expenditure or process improvement, or maybe you have a bad piece of a manufacturer that you want to switch from. So Brent, what are some of the ways people can use this data?
Yeah, and I think, Jeff, just to step back for a second too, I think you were, the process that you were kind of talking about on optimizing the inspection app that you see here is that, a lot of the states have a generic form that they require you to fill out, right? So one of the things when you look at our application, those questions are coming directly off of that form. And again, they can be structured in a way that can be more efficient for the people on the site actually filling out the inspection. But what we do on the back end is we'll actually map that to the specific state regulatory forms. Or if you guys have a checklist or something that you guys are using internally within your organization that you wanted to create an AFI for, we can create that and map it back to the same format. Now, we could always create a new form for you. But if you've got something you've been familiar with, your teams are familiar with, we can map it directly back to those aspects of it, so that they're filling out something that's familiar to them each time that they're out there. And like what Jeff was talking about, right, is that data that you're capturing, and then the data points that you have within the Edge, right, all of the equipment and your asset information becomes very, very powerful. Even if you kind of tie in your maintenance tracking system, right? If you're using the API within the Edge platform, or maybe you're using the API out to a different maintenance system, those data points can be pulled back in, and we can leverage those data points to really help you kind of better understand what's actually happening at your locations through the inspection process. And a great example of this is what we did with the data that we captured across those 7 million questions. Right, there was about a little over 7,000 questions that were failed responses around containment sumps. And so what we did was we actually took data points from different data points within the platform and looked at different manufacturers of sumps, different contractors that were actually installing the containment sumps across those locations. And then we matched it up to see which containment sumps were having the most frequent failure points, right? We didn't necessarily break it down to what those actual failure points were, but now that those are data points we can get to, and that's a part of the optimization process. But we could define, that, like you see here, containment sump 1, 2, and 3. We see that containment sump 3 was actually having the most frequent failures across the questions that were being asked. And then we also looked at it from the standpoint of the contractors that were actually installing these containment sumps, right? So were we seeing similarities on a certain contractor that was installing the sumps where they were failing more frequently? And what we were finding was that contractor number 2, across the 3 sumps that we were reviewing, were having the most issues with sumps that they were installing. So how do you leverage that data, right? It's, it kind of tells you that, out of the containments that were being utilized or being used, and we're not going to necessarily call out a specific manufacturer model of containment. That's something that you guys can do within your data. We just wanted to be able to show you that through the data, if it's properly set up and properly optimized, you can really perform some really good analytics around which components are failing the most frequent. Now, we did this on sumps, but you could do this on half-act systems. You could do it on really any asset or part that you have. You can leverage that back from different data tables within the platform to questions that you're asking across the apps, to even your maintenance systems and the issues that you have there, right? So you tie all of those things together. And now when you're sitting down and meeting with contractors, you're negotiating prices, you're going to try to find components that don't fail as frequently and impact your teams the most. You can actually do that very meaningful, so that when you're buying equipment, you're setting up your capital costs and looking at those projections each year. You can make sure that you're installing good quality equipment that's minimizing the impacts to your teams. And then also when you're meeting with your contractors, you have the ability to be able to really kind of dive into these issues with them and say, listen, I'm seeing more issues with you than I see with any of my other contractors. You can make the decision: do you stay with them, or do you look for other contractors where you have less issues, right? Because at the end of the day, these failures, these installations that are causing more issues, they're costing you time and they're costing your company money. So how do you kind of set up ways to reduce those costs by having better visibility into the issues that are actually occurring at your locations? Now, again, these are components that we're seeing that are just kind of on the sump side, but if you tie that back into fire extinguishers, if you tie them into any of the other inspections we've kind of talked about, or anything that you can think about that you might be responsible for managing at your sites, those are all data points that you have the ability to be able to manage with the platform. And from this aspect of it, if you kind of look at it from the context of, let's say you want to dive in a little bit deeper, you want to optimize this a little bit more. So we see that, the sump 3 is failing. Well, maybe it's a specific manufacturer model number. Maybe you get a little bit more granular in the questions you ask around, is it a lid system? Is it a gasket system? Is it a cracked flange or other component within that containment sump that's actually resulting in the failure? And what is actually occurring for it? All the photographs that are taking, there's a tremendous amount of data that you can leverage from that to really be able to use to have very meaningful conversations with contractors, with manufacturers, again, to help improve the products. Additionally, potentially even to help kind of guide and direct the regulations that we're all required to manage by, right? If we can actually show them through data that, you're not really having an issue with containment sumps, you're having issues with these other components, right? Maybe it doesn't drive other parts of the regulations. We actually have a good data-driven decision making that we can leverage off of this, not just within the organizations, but also across the industry and even outside of the industry for that. So hopefully that helps. Jeff, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was going to say 70% of the people are somewhat confident with analyzing their data from inspections. But, one of the other things I was going to say, Brent, you talked about helping to drive maybe regulation changes with some of this data. So, we're coming up on 5 years since the federal requirement for visual inspections came out. Obviously, California, Florida were before. So there's a lot of data out there. Some of it's public, some of it's not public, some of it's in paper, some of it's in databases. So, with all that data that's out there, there are going to be changes coming. And to Brent's point, the questions on here, we're dynamic. We can change it. As the states are changing their forms, we change our forms behind the scenes. So we're always, up to date with the correct forms on the UST inspection side of things. But, there could be some further questions that maybe the states ask in the future, or maybe, to Brent's point, if you're sitting on any of those roundtables or stakeholder meetings, you can use some of this data to help drive and change those inspections. So it is valuable. It's just not hey, we did an inspection. Let's use the data for what it's really for, and that is to ensure fuel tank systems are not contaminating groundwater, and then it also impacts brand image, profits, notice of violation. So it's a trickle down effect, but this is really that monthly insurance that your system is working the way it's supposed to be working.
Yeah, great point, Jeff.
All right, with that, we are going to open this up to Q&A. So reminder, put your questions in the chat. And Connor, you want to get us going?
Yes, we have quite a few questions that have filtered throughout the session. So thanks, everyone. So take us off. First question we received is, how do you recommend handling states that want their handwritten inspections available on the state form at the site? South Carolina is one that comes to mind.
Yeah, and I would say, and Jeff, I can lead out with that, and certainly you can tie in. But I think certainly we have a ton of different clients today that are doing automated inspections in South Carolina. We probably do 1,000 or so inspections there across our clients. So we're doing that with those forms, and our forms are kind of automated in a way where it will sign off on those, and we can route those to your site. So creating a site level login and having visibility there for the inspection. So there's a number of different ways to get that there, but I think from a broad side, we're doing those inspections in an automated format today, not necessarily handwritten, across South Carolina and really across all states in the U.S. and then more broadly globally. So there shouldn't be an issue with having a hard copy, hand signed form. We should be able to automate that, and there shouldn't be a reason why you're not able to capture that with our platform in South Carolina. And Jeff, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add.
The only thing I would add is, we have, to Brent's point, we have customers doing it themselves. We also have third-party inspectors that's all they do, doing it in those for hundreds of locations. The other piece we do have through the mobile app is if digital signature is required, that's available through the app, that you can actually sign right on a tablet or a phone or whatever that mobile devices you're using. So you could have that signature file on there. But if there is an issue and you have an inspector, it could just be an inspector. We haven't heard of a full state pushing back on it. But if there is an issue, we'll be gladly to help you out and have that discussion with you and also your inspector if needed.
And Jeff, just to add just one more thing in there, I was thinking about when you were mentioning that is the inspections are also geocoded, right? You can actually run it to make sure that they were actually filled out on the location. So if there's ever a question from a regulator, somebody pencil whipping that at the corporate office and then putting it out at the site, right? You can actually prove if it's opened at the location, where it was open, where it was completed. So just wanted to kind of flag that as a note on this as well.
All right. Next question we received from the audience is, when will AFI be connected to the maintenance dashboard to create a work order from the AFI app?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah.
Jeff.
So, how it works right now, actually, the AFI is linked through the activity log, and then you will be able to create the work order. So we do have it connected through the activity log right now, and it's geared based off of each question. So if you have 50 questions, you don't want to have 50 different work orders going through on there. So it's will be based off of however you want it set up to go through. So you are able to get that maintenance in there currently. Brent, if you want to add any future comments.
Yeah, I think most of the clients want the ability to triage those items before to determine which things actually need to be dispatched out instead of auto creating a work order directly from the activity or from the inspection. So they have it kind of come into the activities or come in in a different format. We have had that question come up. We'd have to probably go back and see where it's at in the development side, but it has come up in the past for it. But like I said, most of the clients today want to have a way to kind of look at it, determine if it's something that really needs to be dispatched out, and if so, then triggering it through either an activity or direct work order is how most companies are doing it today. But certainly happy to talk to you about that a little bit further.
Great. Alrighty. Next question is, are there any device requirements for the app?
So the short answer is no. Obviously, there's some software limitations if you have older devices, but the app itself works on iOS and Android devices. Obviously, you need updated software to be able to get the most current version of the app. There's also through mobile browsers. Whether you're using an iPad with a Safari or a Chrome mobile browser, you can use them both ways, but for the specific app, it works on both Android and iOS devices.
Great. All right. What happens if the questions on the forms change or we need additional questions?
Yeah, so we kind of talked a little bit about that earlier, but from a regulatory side, certainly those forms change periodically, and we have a team of people that are actually monitoring all of the state required forms from the UST and AST inspection. So as those forms change on the state level, our teams are updating that our database of forms, and then you get the newest forms within your inspection process. But if you wanted to add additional questions, so like what we were mentioning earlier on, maybe doing an imaging survey or fire extinguisher inspection, anything that you want to add additional granularity or additional data points, any of these forms can be updated at any time where you can go in and add specific questions. Now, those questions don't necessarily feed directly into the state forms. They won't be mapped to those forms, but you can get to those through different reporting options within the platform. So then you can route those, as failures, as deficiencies, any way to the appropriate people.
Okay. All right. If we have an existing inspection form in PDF format, are we able to use that to automate?
Jeff, you want to take that one, or you want me to?
Yeah, I'll take it. I'm thinking through this, what you're trying to ask. So if you have an inspection form, no matter what it is, as PDF, we are able to take that and develop the questions based off of the PDF form and automate that. And so it will still fill out your PDF form on the backside. And if you do want to set up those deficiency notifications that will then flag into an activity log, we're able to do that. So if you have a form already in any type of format, it doesn't have to be a PDF. We can turn it into a PDF for you. We're able to turn that around and make it digital and fill it out. And then you would also then have a completed PDF form in your e-files as a record.
Great. I think we have time for one more. Does the app track GPS coordinates or something like it so we know the inspector is actually at the location?
Yeah, so we were mentioning that earlier that when they get on the site, as they take photographs, those are geotagged. So that's a separate report that you can run within the platform, but it will tell you can compare that against the site address and make sure that they were actually on the location performing the inspection when it was open and when it was completed. So there is tracking for that within the system.
Great. Well, since that answer went pretty quick, I think we can squeeze one more in. The last one we have in the chat. So are you able to limit inspectors' system access to specific inspections and or locations?
I'll finish it up, Brent. So answer is yes. You can set up different inspections for different locations. You can give access based off of an inspector role, location, what they're trained to do. So it's pretty customizable down to the user role and also the facility. Maybe you don't have, this type of inspection at that location, but you do at 5 others in the state. So when the inspector gets on site, they're going to only see the inspections that are assigned to them that are required for that facility. So they don't have to scroll through, hundreds of different inspections. So it'll be streamlined for them to see.
Perfect. All right. That's all we got for the Q&A.
Yeah, guys. So we're actually closing everything out here. Certainly appreciate everybody's time. As we kind of talk through this middle webinar series. So, we're in the next couple of weeks. We're going to be actually presenting kind of our final in the 3-part series, the actionable intelligence within your work order management. So a lot of the data points that we've kind of shared within the reducing the noise and within the AFI, we're going to bring that kind of to life in what we're talking about within the work order system. So again, how do we reduce that operating cost for you? How do we help you kind of minimize the team impacts? And so we encourage you, and we certainly appreciated you guys being involved in the last 2 of this series, and certainly look forward to kind of talking to you guys in August 22nd at 2 p.m. on the final part of this webinar series. So certainly appreciate everybody's time today, and we're going to kind of close it out for the day, and hope everybody has a great evening.